Hello everybody and welcome back to the King Fox channel. My name is Matt Conager and I'm building that Kit Fox Series 7 STI. This is going to be again another continuation for the ribs that are going in the vertical stabilizer and the rudder. So today I'm going to be fabricating some longitudinal rib stiffeners that are going to go on top of some of the ribs that aren't supported well by structural members and need a little bit beefing up. So sit back, relax, and let's get into this video. For bits like this, you can come right back in while it's still wet and wipe that stuff off. Save you a big headache later on, I think. So you don't get stuff like this where it leaves a big old bump sticking out. I don't know if you can, I think you can see that pretty well, but over here that stuff, definitely, that might be epoxy, or that might be varnish right there. So that's hard as heck. Also down here is a good one. You can see that's definitely sticking up. It's not going to leave a smooth transition when I try to put some fabric over the top of that, so I'm going to have to take all those little pieces off, and I've got spatters all over the place. So that might be okay because the fabric's going to be up here, but regardless, you don't want spatters of this stuff, so you want to try to keep it smooth and keep it contained best you can while it's still wet. After fitting all the ribs on top of the yardsticks and the rudder, I decided to pull them back out, peel these pieces of, for lack of a better term, moleskin off of them, which I believe is only on there for transporting so they don't stick together. And then I'm going to give them a light sanding. It's only on one side of them, so I'm going to give them a little bit light sanding, and then they're just about fitted and ready to go in. So I'll mix up some high sol and let the high sol sit for a little bit while I restack them up on top of the yardsticks, get them in place with some super glue, and then I'll apply the high sol. Just a little light sanding with some 220 is all it takes. This stuff doesn't leave a little bit of residue on top of the ribs, but it comes off fairly nice. And then I just knock down any edges where if I feel splinters or anything like that, knock that down with the 220, and it doesn't take much at all. The use of a palm sander, I think you just go through the thin plies in the wood. Using a little piece of that EPS extruded polystyrene foam, wrap the sandpaper around it. Worked pretty good for getting a little bit of a contour on the edges instead of my finger. That sandpaper gets a little hot. Gotta create a little space so I can get back in behind the rudder and have some room to maneuver. Dialing in another one of these syringes, pull a plunger out, knock down the old epoxy off the top of that thing, and you really probably don't even have to do that because that's at the end of it and you're not really going to contaminate anything as long as the tube's cleaned out. You just knock the tip off of that, knock the tip that's the epoxy tip that's sticking through the tip of the plunger, and then poke some wire in there sometimes, or it depends on how thick the piece that's left back in there, but boom. Ready to go back for another epoxy run.
So I'm hitting up the rudder with a little bit of mineral spirits, just making sure after I scuffed everything up that it's cleaned up and ready to take a little dab of super glue on the ribs in the rudder. So clean the scale up, wipe down my ribs after sanding with a little mineral spirits and a rag. Everything's pretty much ready to go for application. Whip up a quick batch of Hysol. Here you can see me test fitting again the ribs for the rudder. Once I get them in there where I like them, that top one goes up against a framing member, so I just put a little dab of super glue on there and hit it with the accelerator, and then support it with the yardsticks, and then move on down the line. Since I'd already epoxied in the ribs on the vertical stabilizer the day before, they were fixed in place real well, so I could just butt the yardsticks right up against the bottom of them and help me line up the ribs in the rudder. Technique that Jason Murphy showed me. I appreciate that. I'll be using this on the wings when I get to it and lining up more ribs that I have to put in the wings. I didn't get a good shot of this one, but basically the piece I'm putting in down on the bottom goes up against framing members, and then I set this base in. They go up against tabs, so you can't really misalign them. And it just gives me a good template to put those two ribs in the back of the rudder, and the rib at the bottom of the rudder sits on the bottom of the framing member of the rudder, so there's nothing to line up there. Had a tendency to pop back up, so I had to put a clamp up on top of it to keep it held down. Give it a little more super glue, and then this guy just sits on there real nice. That's the one I got to put some lateral supports on. Brandon told me that it has a tendency to fold up when you're putting the fabric on there. So now that everything's super glued in place, I'm just going to pull down the yardsticks so I get good access to the top and the bottom sides of the ribs, and I'll start applying the Hysol. I tried to focus just on the tops first. I wanted to see how much Hysol I had left over. So I did the tops, left and right side, front and back, worked my way from the top down. And the little bit I had left over, I decided to go ahead and fill in on the vertical tail in the areas that I hadn't hit yet. Syringes help you lay a nice little bead of Hysol down, and you saw in the opening of the video that while I had put in some of the Hysol on the vertical tail, that's the best time when you can clean it up. And I've seen a guy use a little bit of water, or he just puts mineral spirits on his finger and just smooths it in so it makes a nice transition into the framing member of the airplane, or the airfoil, I guess. Unlike on the horizontal tail where I just put the Hysol on there and let it set up, and then I have a lot of bumps on the leading edges of I call them the bird mouths of the ribs, where they meet the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer, and I'm gonna have to go sand that down or chisel it. It doesn't really want to sand nicely, and I don't want to go through the paint, so I'll probably try some sort of mineral spirit and see if I can soften it up a little bit and pare it down with a used chisel or something like that. If not, I'll get a rasp or just some heavy grit sandpaper, and I guess if I go through the paint I can just touch it up with a little bit of touch-up paint that comes with the kit. So I'm just going to hit up these front ribs on the vertical stabilizer and any other areas that I can think of. I had a pretty decent amount of Hysol here, so it worked out pretty well. And with the amount remaining in the tube, I was able to hit up all the other remaining portions of the vertical stabilizer that I missed from the day before. I focused on the top sides and any areas where I had some diagonal framing members come through, or if I was sitting directly flush on top of a framing member like that lower rib. That you can see it still has the black clamp on it there. That one took quite a bit because I hit all the holes up and down the length of it, made sure it had a good adhesion to that framing member. And I spoke a little too soon. I did have to mix up a tiny bit more and get down low. Try to get up underneath the undersides of those pieces in the rudder. Kind of help to lay down on the floor. I guess you could lift your tail up and prop it up in the air, but I didn't really have a good sawhorse or anything to set it on, so I just decided to use up the remainder of this second batch in areas that I didn't quite completely cover the first time. And it doesn't look like I'm going to get to the lateral or the longitudinal stiffeners in either of the vertical tail or the rudder in this video. It's getting a little late. It's time to wrap things up, but so I'll get to that in the next video. Thank you guys for watching today. I hope you liked what you saw. If you did, hit that like button, the subscribe button, and the little tiny bell for future notifications so you don't miss out on good videos like this one in the future. If you see something I'm doing wrong, you got some suggestions or tips, tricks, anything I can do better, please leave that down in the comments below, and I'll try to answer those in the order in which they were received. Thanks again for watching. Have a great night or day, whatever time it is, wherever you are. King Fox out.